Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're taking a look at a multifaceted dexterity build that's going to focus on vortexing. A vortex is a series of devastating pseudo-combos that are extremely difficult for your opponent to escape from, ultimately resulting in a massive amount of damage, and typically a win. When used properly, this technique will have your opponents dropping faster than a DLC video from Zyostorm. Today we'll take a look at the build, the data around our weapons, and a showcase where we take a deep dive on what really makes this setup so dominant. The setup is a fairly standard dex build with a focus on successive attacks and our Ashes of War. We'll be boosting those two things with the Shard of Alexander and Millicent's Prosthesis. We'll also increase our poise and weight load with our other two talismans. Unfortunately, this week's build came together with some fashion so ugly it nearly went full circle and became high art. So like last time, we'll have two options. One for those of us that care about poise, and the other for those of us that don't want to shatter a mirror every time we look into it. Option 1 is classy, youthful, and sure to get you rizzed up cleaner than a skibbity toilet is Sigma. This involves Diallo's Mask, the Beast Champion Armor, Bly's Gauntlets, and the Royal Knight Greaves. Option 2 benefits from the hideous yet poise and stat optimal Lion's Imp Head, granting us 2 points in vigor and more poise than the other imp heads, with the same weight. Below that, we'll wear our poorly shingled roof armor set, the Gauntlets of Solitude, and the Tree Sentinel Greaves. As for the weapons, we'll be running a main hand Dismounter with the offhand backhand blade. We'll also have some swaps in our pocket, which are as neat as they are balanced. For super aggro groups, we have the tried and true Waves of Darkness. For Great Shield users and players that we just want to BM, we have the Sword of Night. And when we're scared of getting parried, we have the trusty Arumi. Lastly, for backstab wake-ups, we can choose between the Falx and the Rakshasa's Weeb Cutter. On our Dismounter, we'll be running Sword Dance because it's very, very strong for vortexing, and we'll also have Thunderbolt on our backhand blade just for a little bit of extra range. As always, if you found this video helpful and wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd really appreciate it. I am trying to hit 10k subs before the end of the year, and it would really help me out. Next, we'll take a quick peek at the poise and frame data to get a better understanding of the moveset. For some, this might be the part of the video where you're essentially eating your broccoli, but I think you'll actually learn something, and it'll make the showcase dessert that much sweeter. I got positive feedback on my charts from last time, so we'll continue using this style of data visualization, but if anyone feels that this is more confusing than actually looking at the raw numbers, please let me know. On the left, we have the poise damage for all the Dismounter attacks. On the right, we'll have the backhand blade broken down by all of its 4 different swings. You'll note that the one-handed attacks are above the dotted line, while the two-handed attacks are below. Also note that the thick red line indicates the 133 poise breakpoint. This means that any attack type that doesn't reach this red line is not a guaranteed poise break. As you can see, most of the attacks with the Dismounter will poise break, except for the follow-up light attack chains. This means we'll be using the Dismounter to get poise breaks, however we also have the option to two-hand our Dismounter if we need hyper armor. The backhand blades have a lot more hits, but we can see that many of these attacks still end up breaking the 133 poise damage threshold. We'll mostly be using this weapon in our offhand, so the big number to note is the 110 poise break point on the light attack. If your opponent is a big chunky boy like us, then our offhand R1 will not stagger. Sometimes we may want to use the two-handed moveset on the backhand blades, in which case I'd recommend the two-handed light attacks, the running heavy attacks, and the crouching attacks, all of which can get you above the 133 poise breakpoint. Feel free to peruse this chart at your leisure by pausing the video, or explore the exact numbers in the spreadsheet linked below in the description. Now, onto the frame data. We'll start with the main scenario we encounter when trying to get a nice vortex going. The Dismounter R1 into backhand blade L1 into sword dance. In this example, we'll assume that our opponent gets hit by the light attack, delays their roll, gets hit by the offhand backhand blade, then panic rolls, and then gets hit by sword dance. While this sounds like a rather specific combo, I found that this is actually quite consistent with players that don't panic roll after the first Dismounter attack. The main thing to understand is Sword Dance's first hit comes out on frame 76, and that our opponent's roll out of stun from the backhand blade swing has recovery frames ending on frame 78. This means that our offhand backhand blade is a very consistent roll catch into Sword Dance, and that the Dismounter's light attack is a great way to get your opponent to panic roll after a backhand blade attack. Quickly, we can glance at a few other common attack types. The Dismounter has an R1 coming out on frame 17, and an uncharged heavy attack coming out on frame 21. The backhand blades have a one-handed light attack coming out on frame 13, but what makes this option so strong is the ability to dodge on frame 24 and move on frame 30. Compare this recovery to that of the Dismounter, where you can't dodge until frame 31 and can't move until frame 43. We understand why the backhand blade is so great for get in, get out scenarios. We also see the light attack comes out in 2 swings, the first coming out on frame 11 but only dealing about 28 poise damage, and the second coming out on frame 18 with about 110 poise damage. The crouching attack, however, also comes out on frame 11, which is essentially unreactable, and deals over 133 poise damage when both swings land. They do come out simultaneously, so this is very likely. Also note the faster recovery when compared to the light attack. For these reasons, the crouching attack is one of the strongest options when two-handing the backhand blades. Finally, we'll compare the 2 options for the two-handed running attacks. The running light is a bit slower and does less damage, but has better forward momentum. The running heavy is quite devastating, coming out on frame 12 and dealing damage with a total of 4 different hits. If your opponent has under 55.2 poise, the first 2 swings will poise break and likely demolish your opponent's HP bar with the subsequent swings. Alright, thanks for making it through the nerdy stuff, now we can move on to the fun stuff. For these duels, I didn't want to focus just on situations where I was able to completely vortex my opponent with the same setup of right hand, left hand, sword dance, right hand, left hand. So we'll be doing duels where we mix it up a little bit, and we can see just how many different strong options there are that can really punish your opponent if they don't roll out or if they guess wrong. This next opponent has a neutral game that kind of harkens one back to being in line at the DMV, so you'll be waiting for a long time before those phalanx connect, but eventually they do come out and we're able to get aggressive here, going for a couple different attacks, trading with sword dance because it's actually not their turn yet, and again just getting off a lot of damage very, very quickly. But as I mentioned, not all of these duels are going to be like this. However, we are seeing some very, very strong players just guessing wrong and essentially getting flowcharted by this really, really strong setup. And once one hit lands and then either they don't roll out appropriately or they try to take priority, it just doesn't really work out that well. So our next duel is going to be against a player with fists, and fists are one of the strongest setups in the game. Star fists do a lot of damage, they have a very fast, low recovery, heavy attack, and this player is very patient. We'll actually be seeing them in the last duel as well, where they're going to be running power stance straight swords and using handy tech, which is another one of the strongest setups in the game. So again, a competent player, like very strong fundamentals, using a very strong setup against our setup, which, you know, is not meta, but maybe could be. I don't know. It's, you know, I'll let the really like sweaty players figure that out. But here we can see just some incorrect guesses, and we're able to get a win on a very strong player. Next up, we have somebody using the Bear Claws, which are now actually quite strong. The heavy attack does great poise damage. The Ash of War is pretty devastating, especially because of the true combo that comes with the L2 followed up by another L2. And this player has a lot of good forward momentum that we need to look out for, but fortunately we are able to catch their second roll with Sword Dance and then shut things down with the Dismounter. Our next opponent is also running the Dismounter, however they have the two-handed moveset, giving them some hyper armor. So we don't have hyper armor in the same way. We can switch over to the two-handed moveset, but we're going to be utilizing Sword Dance to get that hyper armor when we need it, and then just trying to space and use the utility of our offhand weapon to get poise breaks where we can. So that's going to be really nice to play around their hyper armor because we have a very quick attack that comes with the backhand blade. So our main hand weapon is going to be very reactable just because of its slower attack types, and we'll have to either get a good prediction, but we can get some punishes with the backhand blade after their hyper armor is over. And here we're able to, again, just get in some quick hits, alternating between the left and right hand weapon and doing our best. So here is just kind of my final attempt to convince you that this is one of the strongest setups that I've ever put together, and this is a very, very long game with the player from earlier. They're using power stance straight swords, they're using handy tech, and I just went through that first part at 4 times speed because it just, like, this is sweaty duels at their peak, where there's so much time in neutral, you're really just working around trying to figure out where there are good openings in everyone's neutral game, you know, throwing some things out, but maybe they're not connecting. And we slow it down for the last 30 seconds to just see some of the pressure. We're finally able to get some running light attacks that do actually clip our opponent. You have to be very, very careful against a Dismounter. Really trying to roll everything is probably the way to go rather than trying to space, and we do get the victory. So with that, we can move on to the invasions. Alright, so for our first invasion, we're going to be in the Red Main Castle area, and we're going to start things out with the Great Bow, just trying to antagonize these players a little bit, get some chip damage in where we can, and, you know, kind of get a feel for what these players are going to go through. So we do see that the Moonlight Greatsword comes out, and that heavy attack is going to be kind of a thorn in our side throughout the course of this invasion, as well as some Moonveil business from the host, but we're able to kind of get in, get out, do more damage than we take in the process, and we're also experimenting with some of the hefty pots. So because this is a Dex build, we have the lightning version, and that's going to be doing a lot of damage. It's one thing to note, though, that you don't get the full 180 turn with the hefty pot. If you are facing the wrong way when you initiate the startup of that throw, you're not going to be able to turn all the way around, and that's something that I'm still dealing with because that's how I throw the non-hefty pots. So yeah, makes sense to just face the direction you want to throw a little bit more precisely with the hefty pots. So we do catch up with the players again and use our Ash of War on Great Bow. Then we try to get this player. Unfortunately, they have iframes after the fall, so we don't get our jumping heavy to connect, and we don't get our sword dance to quite reach either. So they're definitely on the back foot, but we're really just trying to catch up with them. The running light attack is going to be great for roll catches, especially if they panic roll, but we don't have a perfect connection with them, so we're just trying to get in where we can and do as much damage in the moment. Now we are kind of forced to back up here. We were hoping that kind of the bags on the ground might block some of the Moonveil hits, but of course Moonveil just goes through everything and doesn't quite work out. And again, we're seeing a little bit of latency from the host here and need to back off as there are some more projectiles coming our way. So again, this time we turn around to throw our hefty pot, and it works out quite well as we get pretty massive amount of damage with that throw. And fortunately, that player is able to heal before we can get too aggressive. We really just don't want to get poise broken by the Moonveil, and so we're just, you know, again, doing bits of damage here and there, doing our best to keep players aggro, but, you know, hoping that we'll get some alone time with a player. And that works out for a second where this player comes at us with the Twin Blade, but then the Moonveil starts coming in from behind, so once again, needing to back off. And really just playing kind of cat and mouse with these players, looking for the right opportunity to deliver our burst damage. And that's really the game plan here. We're not going to be able to hyper armor through too much just because we're not two-handing our weapon at this time, but we are going to need to back off here as we're not trying to finish off the host. And here we get poise broken, which is quite unfortunate, and then get hit by lightning before we can kind of continue our aggression with the vortex that we'd like to go for. And that's kind of the thing with this build. In invasions, it's very, very strong for duels, but in invasions where you're frequently interrupted, it's a little bit harder. So there are going to be moments where we're going to be going for more burst damage than really like the vortex potential. And this is one of those situations too where like the host is just way more aggressive than either of the phantoms, which really goes against what we're trying to do, which is focus any of the phantoms. But at this point, we've done enough damage to this player with the Twin Blade that they are out of heals, and it just takes one more running light attack to finish them off. And now we can focus on the other phantom here with the Sacred Blade Ash of War applied. And the player with the Power Stance Moonlight Greatswords just was really swinging a lot, and there's a lot of active frames where the hitbox for those swords are present, so it can be a little bit difficult to kind of get out of that situation. Here we do a nice job of using the barrels as cover where we go for our flask, and then once again, just kind of focusing on this player. We've now hit them with a Frostpot, so they are frostbitten, which is really nice, and we can begin getting kind of aggro, trying not to get hit by too much. A lot of projectiles coming our way, just kind of waiting for those to come and space as best we can, and we throw out a random harpoon. I've definitely been enjoying the harpoons. I think they're a lot of fun to incorporate. They have very low recovery and they come up pretty fast, so if your opponent is lined up well, you can really get them. So here we go for a running attack on the backhand blades. Is a great way to just kind of catch up to this player that we have a hard time catching up to, and here this player is just thrown out so many swings with their power stance great swords that we just really want to parry. So we go for that parry, we go for that riposte, and we get the W against this group of 3 that not necessarily like the most challenging, but they were all doing a lot of damage, and it's just kind of a good appetizer invasion in my opinion. Now this next one I thought was a lot of fun as well. We have a group of 3, and we're going to be just kind of demonstrating the utility of the Sword of Night here, as we have one player that's blocking. Now if you don't know, the Ash of War for the Sword of Night does go through shields, so when you see somebody that's just kind of turtling, obviously you can try to guard break them, but using the Witching Hour Ash of War on the Sword of Night is a great way to just kind of surprise them, because similar to like Piercing Fang or something, it just goes right through the shield and usually does a lot of damage, and it also combos nicely into a follow-up heavy attack, so something to think about there as just kind of another option when you have somebody that's turtling. Now we are going to be throwing out some Waves of Darkness because these players are really aggressive, and we kind of just need a little bit of extra space. We will also note that we were kind of going in the wrong direction earlier. We were kind of progressing backwards through the level, and having the option to progress forwards through the level is much better. See in that moment that the host and the Phantom were focused on the PvE, and I got a little bit of alone time with the other Phantom, and that allowed us to just land a nice Waves of Darkness on them and finish them off in essentially one hit. So we love that. And just kind of those decision-making ideas are going to be very beneficial, where you decide consciously to turn around, stop running away from the opponents, run through your opponents, and progress forward through the level, even though you've kind of been backed into the back part of the level. So that's kind of the idea there. And we do have some more PvE behind us that we know we can get included if necessary. Here we do get the guard break on the host, however, we're a little bit too slow with the riposte and end up dealing no damage. And the biggest issue with this Phantom was definitely the latency. Like, it was just very, very difficult to predict when we'd be able to hit them, and we weren't actually able to get them slept either, and that was kind of surprising because the mask that they're wearing does lower their focus, and that's kind of the reason for throwing out sleep pots. There's a couple masks that lower focus, and anytime you see those, it's not a bad idea to throw out maybe more sleep pots than you normally would, because they'll get slept more quickly than they normally would. So really just trying to take advantage of that. And again, we see a scenario where their host is a little bit more aggressive than the Phantom for the most part, and we are doing bits of chip damage on the host, but it's hard to get some alone time with the Phantom. Here, as they attack the PvE that's caught up, we're able to get in at least one swing, but it's really not enough. We really needed a couple more attacks to actually connect, and here we get a couple to actually connect this time. We get the sword dance after they go for the guard, and yeah, I think the range definitely surprises some people on a weapon like the Dismounter. It's just got amazing range, and is really great for catching up for people that don't double roll. So the host at this point is all alone, and they decide to back up through the level, so PvE will not be a factor at this point, but we are going to sprint along, try to hit them with the great bow, and just kind of catch up in general. And we do a bit of talisman swapping, putting on one that's going to give us a little bit faster stamina recovery, just because we're not sure how long we're going to be running. But at this point, the host is throwing out a lot of wild swings. We get a guard break with the shield, no riposte with the dagger, but really just what we want is the parry. So we get hit once, and then expect them to swing 2 more times, roll through the second swing, and then parry the third. And we're able to just kind of say GG's here. So that was one that I definitely enjoyed, involved a lot of different players, and I just yeah, I thought it was instructive just how you can kind of navigate the level and use the PvE when you need it, and take advantage of it in those moments. So our next situation is going to be a group of 3. We're able to land a couple hits and then swap over actually to an HDS. So this is something that I haven't done in a while, but something I used to do a lot to just kind of catch up to a player that was running away. And yeah, having a hard swap over to an HDS to just grab a running heavy is a great way to, utilize that forward momentum, get that last bit of HP that you want. And also that particular HDS, the Dragon King's Cragblade, has a really nice Ash of War that trades really, really well. Does a lot of damage, has super armor. It's just very, very strong. So if you get used to landing the uncharged version of that Ash of War, a lot of times you can trade in ways that your opponent won't expect, and if they're at like half health or a little bit lower, usually, you'll be able to finish them off in a trade that they're not expecting. So at this point, we see the spell that they're going for. We get the backstab. Here we try to land the backstab on this other player. A hunter has come into the world, but This host doesn't have a lot of vigor, so they kind of bravely disconnect, which honestly, like, probably the right move in that situation. And we can move on to the next one. So this one is a group of 3 that was extremely challenging, and sometimes you don't really have the option to like be picky and choosy with who you're going to go focus on, and sometimes you just have to kind of like let it play out how it will. So this Phantom here with the Twin Blade is the one that I'm focusing on right now, mostly because they have the helm that, again, lowers their focus. It gives them some extra points in dexterity and strength, I want to say, but it vastly lowers their focus. So we'll be able to sleep them with the sleep pot a lot more easily than anybody else. However, with the healing coming in from the other Phantom and just the raw damage coming in from everybody, it makes a lot of sense to just back off here, try to survive, and just kind of reset back to neutral and hope to find an opening. So here we're not sure if we can kind of bait them towards the edge of the cliff. Potentially we'd be able to knock them off with the Zweihander's Wave of Darkness, but they're a little bit passive here. Host goes, or the Phantom here goes for rejection, which I just thought was so funny. Like, it actually comboed and worked out really well for them. And here we go for Waves of Darkness, get a bunch of damage, try to throw out a running light, it doesn't connect, and then immediately that problem is solved for the Phantom by just heal from afar. So heal from afar is such a wet blanket in Invasions. It's just like you take trades, you use your resources, and then it's just all for nothing. Like, that player doesn't even have to use a flask after getting most of their HP deleted. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to deal with heal from afar, and we need to back off again and once again regroup. We throw out a frost pot just to see if we can get somebody frostbitten, but we see that they're not going to follow me backwards through the level. Again, we would like to progress further into an area with PvE, but this does mean taking the elevator, and the elevator is a little bit dangerous, but at this point we kind of have no choice because they are just going for the elevator. So we do see them again. We throw a frost pot, just again hoping to increase our physical damage. We are going to have some physical damage associated with the Waves of Darkness, Ash of War, so if that player can be frostbitten, potentially we can one-shot them where we weren't able to earlier. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And here we weren't sure if we could get a Great Bow Rain of Arrows off as they're all on the elevator. That's a pretty good time, but our swaps weren't fast enough. We weren't able to kind of get that lock on for long enough, and they immediately send the elevator down back for us. So here we kind of only have one opportunity, so what we're going to do is buff with Exalted Flesh, increase our AR again with Uplifting Aromatic, and also give us kind of like one free hit that they can land on us without us taking too much damage. And we're going all in on our Ash of War, Waves of Darkness, which it really just feels like the right tool for the job. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't do much. We get a huge amount of damage on the Phantom, but here we're actually able to finish off the host. So they got a little bit too aggressive in that moment, but I was just very happy to come out with the victory against these players because yeah, heal from afar was going to be a problem throughout the course of that entire invasion, and just, you know, we'll take what we can get in that scenario. So this next one, we have a group of 2. We see the shield, so we swap over to the Witching Hour Slash, and then a blue comes in and just immediately starts sending so many Ashes of War our way. So we need to look out for that. Now, they are super aggressive, and they are, again, wearing that helm that lowers your focus. So immediately switch over to sleep pots. I know that I'm going to be able to sleep them, especially as they go for their Ash of War. Again, Stormblade is not that slow, but when you're in a sleep cloud and you have such low focus, it really just does a number on you. And here we're actually able to get the Ash of War Witching Hour into the true combo that's the heavy attack afterwards, and that pretty much does the trick for the blue. So understanding their build, taking advantage of their low focus, and also just taking advantage of the combo that comes with Witching Hour is going to work out quite well for us, and we can focus here on this Phantom while the host is distracted by the PvE. So this is very classic behavior where a blue will come into the world, get super aggro, get the PvE aggroed, and then die. And so like the blue comes in, gets the PvE aggroed, and then you know, it's just kind of over. So that's all we have for today. I hope you enjoyed the invasions and the showcase. If you have any questions, definitely let me know, and I hope you have a great day.